Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam with Historic Travels, and before we get started today, as always, I'd just like to take a quick moment to welcome all my new subscribers and to thank everybody who's leaving me comments and messages down below. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. And hey, while we're at it, please smash that like button if you haven't already, and if you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys, it really helps out a lot. And if you would like to take an extra step to help support the Historic Travels YouTube channel a little bit more, I did set up a Patreon page. There's a link for that in the description below, so if you'd like to take a look at that, by all means. All right, now let's get into this topic. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different. We all know the main story of Titanic. She struck an iceberg, she went down. We know about the heroes, we know about the villains, we know about the ship's officers, we know all that stuff. For today's video, I want to touch on a little bit of a different topic. A topic that isn't that widely discussed within the Titanic community. And that topic is the children of Titanic. So what I did for this video, since the children of Titanic stories aren't that widely known, I selected 3 kids in particular. And I decided to briefly tell each of their stories and explain what happened to them on the night the Titanic sank, because when you really look at these stories, they're pretty incredible and they're kind of scary at the same time, very scary actually. So I just thought I would tell these stories and explain what happened to these kids. The 3 kids we're going to be talking about is William Loch, Lorraine Allison, and Eva Heart. All 3 of these kids have some mind-blowing stories about what actually happened to them on the night the Titanic sank. So I thought I'd pay it forward a little bit. Now, unfortunately, one of these 3 kids did not survive the evening, so we are going to talk about that as well. All right, everybody. Well, hey, without any further ado, let's get into the topic. The first child we're going to be talking about is Eva Heart, as seen in this photo right here. She boarded the Titanic in 1912 with both her mother, Esther Heart, and her father, Benjamin Heart. Eva Heart was 7 at the time that she boarded the Titanic. Now, her family was originally scheduled to sail on a ship called the USS Philadelphia. However, at the time, there was a coal strike in the Southampton area, and the White Star Line had moved all the coal from these other ships and gave them to the Titanic so they wouldn't have to delay the Titanic's maiden voyage due to just a coal strike. So Eva Heart and her family found themselves on the Titanic as second-class passengers on the ship's maiden voyage. Now, once Eva's family had learned that they were going to be transferred to the Titanic, Eva's dad was completely blown away. They got transferred from this ship that no one really cared about to the biggest, most luxurious ship in the world at the time. Of course, Eva's dad would be excited. And you see, Eva Heart was only 7 at the time, so she didn't really understand what was going on. She'd never been on a ship at all before Titanic. So she just knew that people were talking about it, but she didn't really understand why. Now, the only person in the family that wasn't excited was Eva's mom. You see, she had never said a word about crossing the Atlantic, no fear, nothing, when they were on the other ship. However, when she learned that they were transferred to the Titanic, she got really mad and really scared and started arguing with her husband. She was like, "We cannot go. I've got this terrible feeling something horrible is going to happen if we go on the Titanic." And Eva's dad just kind of laughed it off. He's like, "You're being silly, nothing bad's going to happen." So he eventually did convince Eva's mom to get on the Titanic under one condition. She said, "I will only go if I sleep during the daytime and I will sit up at night." And that's what she did. Every day the ship was at sea, she would sleep during the day, and at night she would just sit in her cabin and read. And that's what she did throughout the entire voyage. So that meant she was wide awake on the night of April the 14th, 1912, when Titanic struck the iceberg. While Eva's mom was reading on the night of April the 14th, 1912, she said she felt a very slight bump. It wasn't that much, it's a very slight jar, but she later described it as a train pulling into a station or a jerk. And as soon as she heard it, she immediately woke up Eva's dad and told him to go up on deck and go check out what was going on. She said as soon as she felt this slight bump, she immediately knew that this was this horrible thing that she had been so afraid of the entire voyage. Right after Titanic had struck the iceberg, Eva's mom woke up her husband and told him to go up on the boat deck and find out what was going on, because she knew something had happened, she just didn't know what. So he did. He went up and looked around, and then he came back pretty quickly and told Eva and her mom to get up on deck immediately, that something was going on. And that's what they did. They were one of the first people up on the boat deck because of the high alertness and how quickly Eva's mom responded to the iceberg impact. And you see, I think that's a big reason why both Eva and her mother did survive the sinking. Unfortunately, her dad wasn't allowed into a lifeboat and he would perish in the sinking. But that's just crazy to me. I don't put that much faith in predictions of the future or anything, but this was a case where Eva's mom had this horrible feeling that something was going to happen, and it turned out she was right. It's because she was awake at night that both Eva and her mom were actually able to survive the sinking of the Titanic. The next child we're going to talk about is William Loch Kudus, as seen in this photo right here. Both he and his mom were traveling in the third class section of Titanic, and when Titanic struck the iceberg and began to sink, when they finally made their way up to the lifeboats and were trying to be evacuated, William found himself a victim of the whole confusion over women and children first argument that had been inflicting some of the Titanic's officers. For those of you who don't know this, there was actually some confusion among some of the Titanic's officers on who to actually put into the Titanic's lifeboats. The order was women and children first, but some of the Titanic's crew determined that the captain meant women and children only. Now, I did make a dedicated video talking about this, and I'll post a link to it down below, so I'm not going to go into it too much in this. But needless to say, William found himself with an officer who had interpreted it as women and children only, and almost wasn't allowed into a lifeboat for one reason. And remember, William was only 9 at the time, so he definitely classified as a child. You see, he was wearing a hat, which the officer confused, and the officer thought that because of this hat, it made him think that William was older than he was. So he initially didn't let William get into a lifeboat. However, the mother protested, the family protested, and eventually he was allowed into a lifeboat. And he did survive the sinking. But just think about that. Just due to the fact that he was wearing a hat, almost prevented a 9-year-old boy from escaping the Titanic. The third and final child that we're going to be talking about in this video is Lorraine Allison. Now, Lorraine Allison was the only first-class child to die in the sinking of the Titanic, and she was only 2 years old at the time. Now, what exactly happened to her isn't known for certain. However, there are some theories and rumors as to what had happened to her and her family during the ship's final moments. Now, I already made a dedicated video talking about Lorraine Allison and her family a while back. If you want to watch that full video, I'll post a link to it down below. Now, to summarize a little bit, Lorraine Allison was traveling in first class with her mother, father, and her younger brother, and they also had a nanny on board that was helping them take care of the kids. Now, right after the Titanic had struck the iceberg, the nanny took their infant son right up on deck immediately and took him straight to a lifeboat. So they were on one of the first lifeboats to actually leave the ship. She did this so fast that the mother and father of Lorraine Allison didn't know where their infant son had went. So they spent the entire sinking looking around the Titanic for the nanny and their infant son, not even thinking that, they went straight to a lifeboat. So they're way out, they're already gone. They've already left the Titanic while the mother and father are still looking around on this ship trying to find them. So after some time, they decided that we can't look for our son anymore, we have to save our daughter. However, they spent so much time doing this that by the time they tried to save Lorraine Allison, all the lifeboats were gone. Now, that's what we know for certain happened to Lorraine Allison. We don't know 100% what caused her death. However, there is a theory, and this is speculation. We don't know for a fact that this happened, but I think it's entirely plausible given the desperate situation that Lorraine and her mother and father found themselves in while the Titanic was sinking. So what is this rumor or legend that could shed some light on what happened to Lorraine Allison? Well, you see, it's rumored that Lorraine Allison made it to Lifeboat Collapsible A, which was one of the last lifeboats to attempt to leave the Titanic. Now, you see, what happened? The Collapsible A was stored on the roof of the officers' quarters on the Titanic's starboard side, and when they were trying to get this lifeboat ready, they pushed it off of the roof and tried to tie it to the Titanic's davits and lower it down the right way. However, they didn't have enough time. The Titanic began to rapidly sink, and because this lifeboat was tied to the Titanic, the ship began to drag the lifeboat down with it. Now, it's rumored that Lorraine Allison and her mother and a bunch of other people were inside this lifeboat while it was being dragged down by the rapidly sinking Titanic. So what ended up happening to Collapsible A? You see, the ship was sinking so fast at this point, and where the lifeboat was still tied to the Titanic, the officers around the boat had to use knives to try to cut the ropes holding it to the Titanic in order to free the lifeboat and keep it from being dragged down with the ship. Now, keep in mind, the lifeboat was also full of people, so they weren't helping, and how fast the ship was sinking, it was a horrible situation to try to free this lifeboat in. Now, eventually they did succeed in freeing the lifeboat from the Titanic just by cutting away the ropes. But by this point, the lifeboat had been dragged so far underwater by the rapidly sinking ship that this lifeboat, now 100% buoyant, shot up out of the water so fast that it ended up spilling most of its occupants into the freezing cold water. And you see, that's what they think ended up happening to Lorraine Allison. They think she was in the boat and she and her mother got dumped into the water when this lifeboat semi-flipped. Then after that, who knows what could have happened to him. You know, I mean, with everything going on around the ship during those final moments, you know, the ship going down, the funnel fell, windows breaking, water circulating, and also how cold the water was, we don't know for certain. But that is the rumor that Lorraine Allison passed away somewhere around Collapsible A during the Titanic's final moments. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Now, before you click away, I have 2 announcements that I need to make on this video real quick. Number 1, I'm actually going to bring the Discord online on a trial basis, most likely tomorrow. I'm going to post a link in my community tab with how to join the Discord. So if you would like to check that out and come in and say hello and, you know, just try to start up this Titanic historic community, then yeah, come and check out the Discord and come in and say hello. I would love to meet all of you. And number 2, I actually did a video with my sister the other day. Now, she made a video talking about the very last meal that was served on board the Titanic in first class the Sunday morning before she went down, or Sunday dinner. And you see, she surprised me with the meal, she cooked it and everything, and she just kind of is like, hey Stan, come here and check out what I did. It's really cool. So anyway, we just made a little video about that. My sister is an awesome chef, and if you would like to see this video, I will have a link to that down below. She's actually setting it to premiere right after this video is done. So everybody go check that out. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thank you all so much for being here. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, as always, everybody, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good night, everybody.